2010, and she founded that organization. It's a private nonprofit here in Jackson. Welcome, welcome, come on in. We're just starting introductions.
This is like church. I'm very scary. Don't get too close.
Yeah, so I'm just introducing Carrie Geraci, who's the director of Jackson Hole Public Art, a nonprofit that she founded here in Jackson. Before that, she was the director of Center of Wonder. Do I have that right, Carrie? Before that. And so Carrie, in her capacity as director of Jackson Hole Public Art, which that's why she's here with us today, she has overseen the installation of many exciting works of art. She'll probably talk to you a little bit about what public art is. I'm sure you have seen many of these installations, and we're going to look at some of them. Some of them are permanent, meaning they're not going anywhere. Others are temporary. They also do a great job of involving local artists in some permanent and temporary projects. Other things I want to say about Carrie is that not only is she an administrator of arts organizations with that hat on, but she's also a fabulous artist herself. She's a painter, and she also has done some art education. Was it the community school at one time? Yeah. And she also, you may not know this, but she's also a great badminton player. I have played with her in her backyard. So Carrie, thanks for joining us. We're excited to have you and to learn more, and also hopefully to learn about some upcoming projects and maybe some ways that people can get involved.
Definitely. Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you all for your intrepid driving in the never-ending winter we're having. I appreciate it. So I'm going to do what I think is a fun little talk today. Why do we make public art in Jackson Hole? And to answer this question, I thought we'd go way back in time. So if we can have the first slide, please. And I will refer to my notes. Some of this I know by heart. Some of it I really do need to refer to my notes. So this is the enclosure. It is 300 feet below the Grand Teton. And these stones that encircle it, it's a horseshoe shape, weigh anywhere from 20 to 500 pounds. It is 7 by 9 feet across, 3 feet high, and the bottom is covered with a sandy material that isn't found anywhere nearby, which indicates that potentially the sand came from erosion of hundreds or perhaps thousands of years. The enclosure was discovered by Nathaniel Langford and James Stevenson on their July 29, 1872 summit of what they thought was the Grand Teton. That was where they summited to. And this was 26 years before the well-known and documented summit of the Owen-Spalding route in 1898. So, who actually built the enclosure? Was it early mountaineers or Native Americans? We know from archaeologists, and there's a great article in the New York Times this week about obsidian cliffs in Yellowstone that relates a little bit to this. So, we know from archaeologists that the earliest human-made artifacts found in Jackson Hole date to the Paleo-Indian period between 12,000 and 8,000 years ago. The earliest humans in the Tetons spent their spring in the valley, and then they moved up to approximately 8,000 feet in the late summer and fall to gather plants and following kind of the path of the ripening plants. So the enclosure could have been built as a vision quest or for some other purpose. We don't really know. Okay, now I'm going to ask everyone to close their eyes. We'll let this one last person come in. Come on in.
Oh, two more.
Two more. Okay. Yay.
They made it.
All right. Come on in. I'm doing a little. This is a little bit interactive. So have a seat and close your eyes. Now everyone imagine what is the most iconic public artwork in Jackson Hole. Okay, change slides. All right, now open your eyes. Does anyone recognize what might be missing from this picture?
Antlers.
Yeah, so on May 14, 1953, the Jackson Hole Guide publicized a call for all residents to bring their antlers to the town square. They were going to build a community-built project. This was organized by the Rotary Club and the JCs, and the construction of the first arch lasted about 4 days. The second arch was erected at the northeast corner in '66, and the two eastern arches went up in '67 and '69. And they do have a steel armature underneath, and each uses approximately 2,000 antlers, and they weigh about 14,000 pounds. So, as we all know, the elk refuge sees about 10,000 elk in the winter, and they naturally shed their antlers. That's a question a lot of visitors ask me. Do they naturally fall off? Do you whack them off? How do you get those antlers? When the arches were originally built, antlers were not considered to be especially valuable, but now, as we all know, people come from around the world to purchase antlers. That first arch lasted about 60 years, but because they're bone, they began to decompose and lose their structure and rigidity. And so in 2006, Pete Carnes and the Rotary Club began fundraising efforts to replace all 4 arches. And by 2015, that was completed, and they last for another 50 years. I personally think the antler arches are one of our best examples of public art. They were built by and for the community with locally sourced materials that are really relevant to our sense of place. The arches celebrate a gathering place where we come together to commemorate important celebrations and moments in history. Does anyone know where one of those first arches is now?
The airport.
Yep. Anywhere else?
There's one down at the Rustic.
The Rustic Inn, yes, yep. And I believe the purchase of those did help support the funds for rebuilding the new ones. Okay, next slide, please. Practical joke. According to Wikipedia, Tom Ross became interested in the history of the American Old West by watching television shows like Bonanza and Rawhide and John Wayne films. He earned his art degree from California State University in Chico. So it's 3 a.m. on a March morning in 1983. This is just hours before the start of the annual Pole Pedal Paddle, which we don't celebrate anymore, but it's the inaugural rite of spring where we race down the mountain, did a Nordic lap, and that biking lap, and then a river lap. So it's the night before this is happening. Tom Ross and some buddies are out installing 154 plywood ravens along Highway 22 as a prank. As the first PPP athletes cycled by, their curiosity turned to laughter as they realized this couldn't possibly be real ravens. This was a joke. So this installation was so beloved that it eventually turned into a fundraiser for the Art Association. It was a surprise, it was playful, and it was inspired by ravens, who are part of our daily lives and whose intelligence and antics intrigue us. Does anyone here happen to own a Tom Ross raven? Yes, I knew someone would. And Bobby
And
does.
if you all look to Greta's beautiful mural in here, she pays homage to.
Oh, that's
to this.
awesome. Okay, next slide,
How
please.
long was that up each bone?
I don't know. Good question.
That is a good question.
And what are they made of?
They were made out of plywood, painted plywood.
And there were 100 and how many?
154. I know Karen Stewart has one.
Nice.
She used to have one in her office at the Art Association.
Nice. And Bobby, do you have yours on display?
It's on our desk.
It's on the desk.
When you look out towards the, towards the.
Scares the other ones away.
We just put it on the desk.
Very nice.
Yeah, and the other birds land on it and talk to it.
Oh, I love that. Okay, a large dose of whimsy. Now it's the year 2019, and the Jackson Hole Land Trust is planning for a big celebrations in 2020. It would have been the Land Trust's 40th and Rendezvous Park's 5th anniversary. They wanted something big. So we showed Lori Andrews pictures of Thomas Dambo's work. He came for a site visit in late 2019, and then, as you all know, the pandemic hit. And in late November 2020, with the permission of the days-old new Land Trust president, Max Ludington, and his board, we entered into a short but sweet and successful year-end fundraising campaign to raise the funds to bring Thomas Dambo to Jackson Hole in the spring of 2021. There are over 100 wood pallets that were deconstructed by volunteers at Red Top Meadows. Those same boys came and helped Thomas Dambo in one of the days of building. It took a crew of 6, that's 3 locals that we hired to build with him, and a team he brought with him, 10 days to build this structure. And does anyone know what the hair is?
Is it antlers or sticks?
It's sticks, it's driftwood collected from the riverbed before the runoff. So Mama Mimi's over 25 feet tall, and her outstretched leg connects from this land spot to another little teeny island. And curious park visitors from the age of 2 to 80 in my times out there have walked across her leg. She offers surprise and delight and has become a destination piece for people to discover. Has anyone here walked across her leg? Yay! And Mama Mimi is a temporary installation. We have funds left in reserve that we're holding specifically for removing her and refurbishing the site with new willows and other plantings. So it will eventually look like just the moose have been there.
You said you might move it?
We will remove it in
remove
3 to 5 years.
Okay.
Yep.
Is it going to go somewhere else? Or is it just going to be dismantled?
Probably not. The way it was constructed is there's kind of a helical armature on the inside, and they build as they go. It's not constructed like one limb at a time. So the face and the hands and feet were constructed in Copenhagen in Thomas's studio and shipped here, but everything else was built on site.
So it's made out of wood. Is there any thing that goes into preserving it? Because you're in the Wyoming Four Seasons, it's just sitting out in the open.
Yeah, good question. Luckily for us, the weather's extremely dry here, so we don't get a lot of rot from moisture with the wood, and she's treated with a clear coat in the fall and the spring, so before the winter and after the winter. And we also put a little bit of a no-skid clear coat on her leg, her outstretched leg, and then the same crew that helped build her go in and reattach any loose boards. My cell phone number is on the plaque there, so if people come across anything amiss during the summer, they call me and I send a crew out there right away. And this spring, she should be getting a little fluff of her hair. You had a question?
Yeah, I'm curious, why are you gonna dismantle her in 3 or 4 years?
We had an agreement with the Land Trust that she would be there for a limited amount of time, and that there was concern that the park may be overrun with visitors from having a Thomas Dambo sculpture. He's installed artworks all over the world. Mama Mimi he's installed at this point 100 large-scale trolls all over the world, and he is about to release, announce a scavenger hunt, a worldwide scavenger hunt to find clues to find the 100th troll. And so we will be installing a plaque here that has a clue. So I think in the spirit of conservation and creating a natural park and being concerned about impact, the Land Trust wants the ability to say, we've had too many visitors, we'd like you to remove it now. There's always the chance they may say, we'd like to keep it longer.
Okay,
In which
so
case,
that's a possibility.
yes, we'll say hooray and keep talking about Mama Mimi. Okay, next slide, please. All right, so this is called the Town Enclosure, and this was inspired by the Serpentine Annual Pavilion Competition in London. Jackson Hole Public Art, with partnership of the Center for the Arts, issued a blind call for proposals for this sculpture. The goal of this work was to not only be a sculpture, but also a venue that could be used by center residents, community members, and the general public for free as a flex space. Some of the feedback that the Center for the Arts has received from the community is, gosh, we'd like to do more things there, but it's so expensive to rent the theater. So this was designed to be a sculpture, but also a place, a venue for free things. As long as it wasn't ticketed, anybody could use it. The commission was awarded to Carney Logan Burke Architects, who are inspired by Western Corral's contemporary sculpture, the architecture of the Center for the Arts, and the incredible views of Snow King to the south. This project has won numerous awards, and it was the first major installation in the Center Park. Does anyone happen to know where this piece is now?
Is it Portland?
No? Close-ish. It was decommissioned and reinstalled in Bozeman, Montana. And it's right near their public library in a big sort of nature park space, and continues to be actively used by the community there. So
Will it be temporary there or permanent there?
I believe it's also temporary there, and if the panels are salvageable, they will come back to Jackson Hole and potentially be used at another location for an entirely different purpose. These are cross-laminated timber panels, which is a very green architectural material that architects are starting to use now. It allows you to very quickly put a roof in place, and then a cold roof is applied to the top of that. So, all right, next slide. So I am showing you two works here, Willow Grove on the left by John Fleming, and Finders Keepers by Patrick Doherty. So Finders Keepers is an exploratory sculpture made solely out of willow. Over the past 30 years, Patrick Doherty has won numerous awards, built over 300 willow sculptures, and has work nearby in Vail, Colorado, and at Tippett Rise. If you haven't been to Tippett Rise, I highly recommend it. It's outside Red Lodge, Montana. It's an awesome, awesome visit. His sculptures require literally a tractor trailer, 18-wheeler truckload of willow. This piece was built with over 1,000 community volunteer hours over the course of August last summer. It was a partnership between Jackson Hole Public Art and the Center for the Arts, and we facilitated some of the site permissions, and we raised a little bit of money. The Center for the Arts raised the bulk of the money, and we also, as we did with the Mama Mimi, 5 local artists were hired to work alongside Patrick as a visiting artist, local artist experience. So now they gained some great knowledge. Willow Grove is by an artist from Portland, Oregon, actually he's from Washington State, named John Fleming. And what is really fun about this project is we always make sure when artists are visiting, they spend time with community members, and they visit the park, they go to the Raptor Center, they explore different people and places. And so because of the location of this central downtown location, and John was very inspired by willow, cottonwood, and other natural materials, he was exploring Carnes Meadow, and we had him talk with Betty Terrell, who's of the Carnes family. And she explained to John that Flat Creek used to run right down Broadway. At some time after right before 1945, in looking at the Teton County GIS maps, the earliest dated maps, you can see where Flat Creek was right along the road, and that had been rerouted to the base of the butte to provide businesses with street frontage. Can you imagine that happening today? I can. So, the other fun thing about this project is two more things. Each cluster is anchored by a massive concrete block. The cost of concrete in Jackson is so expensive that it was less expensive, significantly less, to cast those blocks in Portland and truck them in and place them on site. And so little old me's out there yelling at the excavation company to stop making such a big mess and hurry up and get there. And we're also, this is a very sensitive location in terms of underground utilities. And the two locations where that is installed are pocket parks owned by the town of Jackson. So this was 100% privately funded by the Lohr Foundation to add human pedestrian elements to YDOT's 5-way intersection redesign, which really wasn't paying much attention to humans and more attention to cars. And it's now owned by the town, and we gave them a maintenance stipend. The amber tips are hand cast by the artist and illuminated at night. And we are about to replace all the bulbs in those this spring, so it will again look like a little swarm of fireflies as you're driving home from a nice dinner out. All right, next slide, please.
I have one question about the finders keepers. Where do they get all those willows from?
Oh, great question. So those are all sourced locally between Jackson and Sublette County, and they are a sustainable resource. I also thought it would be really fun to compare and contrast these two in terms of site, in terms of materials, and the stories that they tell. Willow Grove really tells a story about what used to be there. And then Finders Keepers is more about sparking your imagination to come up with your own story. Any other sort of differences or similarities that you all see between these two installations?
They come up very interestingly to the sky.
Form is a similarity. What would happen to your senses in this one versus this one? Think sight, sound, smell.
I smell a moose over there. They love the moose.
Yeah. Over there, you're hearing more traffic, maybe, and not touching it with your hands as much. Whereas this one, you can actually still smell the willow. It has that beautiful willow smell. One other difference, permanent, temporary. Yes?
Is there a plaque on the willows on Broadway
Yes.
explaining all of that?
There's a plaque in English and Spanish, and there's also a plaque on each bench. Each bench was custom made and contains sort of the controls for the lighting system.
Is there a way to make it more visible? It's lost going up and down Broadway in the buildings around it. I think it's, of all the things you put up, it's
Yeah.
the one that
lost.
I can't even picture where it is.
It's in front of Ella Bolitos. Yep. So, no, and it's right across from the one pedestrian crosswalk right there that does work. The one at Hoback Sports is a little trickier to use, yeah. But no, it's really not necessarily designed to be seen from your car, more from a pedestrian standpoint as you're walking by.
But the lights do make it noticeable at night.
They do, although you see the tops, but not the structure so much. Okay, now let's move back here to the National Museum of Wildlife Art. So this is Don Rambat, and his pieces at the base of the museum on the Pathways retaining walls were commissioned through a national call for artists. So I'm just going to share, since you are all docents here and may get a question or two about Don, I'm going to share a little bit of information I discovered from him in addition to what I learned from working with him. So he is an avian artist, and he's been greatly inspired by Larry Barth, Walter Mattia, and Bart Walter. He's born in 1970, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and has a Bachelor of Fine Arts degree in sculpture from the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. For 10 years, he operated Vanguard Sculpture Services, a bronze foundry, and he did that with a man named John Hickman, who was also a college art instructor, and really the mentor behind Don Rambat that got him inspired to start becoming an artist. And here's a quote from some of his first forays into welding. "It was a medium through which I could express myself in a spontaneous yet durable material. It fueled something. I could completely lose myself in the process." His mentors drove him to discover how to think like an artist and continually question the relevance of what he was doing. He kept pushing himself, and among his mentors also include Narendra Patel, who influenced John to get rid of the wings and be able to show flight in a different way. So in addition to his professional experience, he's been a teacher, a volunteer at several organizations. He loves to help with land conservation. He has hands-on experience with birds, including many years branding young falcons with the Wisconsin Peregrine Society. And he's also an avid bird watcher and has a master class falconry permit. His artwork is in several collections: the Benson Park Sculpture Garden in Loveland, Colorado, Brook Green Gardens in Murals Inlet, South Carolina, and in 2017, he won the Lee Yawkey Woodson Art Museum Master Artist Award after he'd been participating in that show 16 different years. Wow. So he was very, very honored to have his work at the base here. And I'm showing two pieces. I thought it would be fun to see his rendering of Aspen Gateway. So this one's called Skyplay, and that one's Aspen Gateway. And the Skyplay piece has carbon steel plate that's been carved and bent to evoke varied wing positions. And the birds have a wingspan range of 5 to 6 feet, and they're about 3 feet tall, the biggest ones. And the Corten steel was lightly treated, but it's just naturally oxidizing. And he was an incredibly organized artist. When he showed up to install this, he had everything stacked in his vehicle as we'd need it. And we really only had to take like one extra trip to the hardware store. He had everything. It was amazing. He also had a big scrape on his belly from sanding artworks a few nights before he was driving all the way here. So he's a very hands-on, very sweet gentleman. And there is a bird hidden in one of these artworks that you might not be able to see. Does anyone know what that is?
Not Lori.
Jane?
Well, you know too, right? It's on the elk refuge side, and is it an owl?
It's a hairy
Oh,
woodpecker.
that's right.
Yep, and he did that because he's an avian artist, and he didn't sign either of these works. He just put his little hairy woodpecker on the Aspen Gateway. So that's just kind of a nice little hide and seek kind of aspect to that. Okay, next slide.
And you all know, you all have been down, some of you I know have walked through that tunnel at the base of the museum driveway. If you haven't, do it when the snow melts and you can sit down there. Because that piece is, I mean, I ride my bike up to the museum sometimes in the summer, so I get to look at it a lot. But it's great to look at from both sides, and there also are birds that nest, swallows
Yes,
nest
yes,
in
the
that
swallows
tunnel.
love that little tunnel. There's
It's
one
very
little
much a
pair.
bird piece.
So these are the wildlife-inspired bike racks that Ben Roth did for the Wildlife Museum. There's two sets, one at the base of the hill and one at the top of the hill. There's a bear, a raven, and a fox. And I don't have a slide that shows each of the three bike racks, but what Ben did is he came in and sketched from paintings on display in the museum. So these are actual figures that were in paintings by very notable artists. And I'm just wondering if anyone knows who the artists were that inspired the bear, the fox, or the raven. Any guesses? I'm not even sure I know the answer to this. Might have to ask Ben.
Robert.
Bob Kuhn.
Robert Bateman, or yeah, Bob Kuhn.
Yep, I think
Bob Kuhn.
Bateman inspired the raven. I think Bob Kuhn inspired the bear. And as far as the fox goes, I wasn't sure if it was a rungus or a coon.
It's the longest on display that.
Okay. So
That's so interesting.
it's really fun. And Ben's gone on to do these stylized bike racks in other locations, but none with as strong of a connection as these have
Carrie,
here.
are there some of his bike racks at our park too?
Yes, yep. So we've also today, in addition to seeing two willow sculptures, we've also seen two raven-inspired sculptures. And any similarities that you noticed or differences between Don Rambat's ravens here and Tom Ross's ravens along the highway? Anything that ravens make you think of when you look at them? So
Noisy.
noisy, I'm not sure if that was what the artists were after. Jane, were you going to say something?
I mean, with Tom Ross's piece, they both do repetition quite a bit.
Yep.
And they tend to, they're social, so they tend to be together.
Yes.
So I guess that's what I
Yep.
was gonna say.
Social and flocks. And what Don said about his use of the ravens was that he was very much wanting to pick a bird that represented our community, and he thought the raven's high level of intelligence and play. He used play instead of mischievous, but we could maybe interchange those. Reminded him of Jackson locals, and so that's why he did those. And then we also have another compare and contrast we could do with the very first image of the enclosure up in the Tetons and the enclosure that was designed for the Center for the Arts. So anything that anyone noticed between those two pieces?
Well, they both create a sheltered space.
Mm-hmm.
They're both natural materials, one wood and one
Yeah.
stone.
Yeah. And
they both make
gatherings.
you they both really make you, I think, wonder
Oh, good. Yeah,
What-
yeah.
what was this created for? What could it be used for?
Exactly. And sort of enclosed a gathering space,
Mhm.
a place
Yeah,
where
yeah.
people could gather. So those are just some examples that I thought related, obviously, to the museum here. It's always fun to learn about Don Rambat. He's a wonderful artist in person. He shows his work at Astoria Gallery in town. And then these also help to answer the question, why do we create public art? And there are certain qualities to some of the works we've shown today, is that some of these pieces become destination pieces, like Mama Mimi. Obviously, the whole museum here is a destination in and of itself. Public art is also unique and memorable and made for the location where it's displayed, designed for the site. It's very site-specifically designed. And it often has a big community component, whether you're responding to a call for artists for the recreation center, or you're part of our Wild Walls Summer Mural Program, where you're being paired with conservation organizations. The public art is telling a story that's unique to the place. And then, like Ben's piece here, you can also, instead of purchasing a bike rack from a factory, ask a local artist to design it. And then you have so much more local character going into it. So what really excites us about public art is the joy of building and discovering these works together, and really using art to amplify our sense of community here. So, I have one more slide, I think. So this is Battle of Wills by Bart Walter. I think you also have an incredible Bart Walter at the base of the Wildlife Museum here. And his work greatly inspired the airport. And again, this piece was the result of a national call for artists. Jackson Hole Public Art helped facilitate that process. And we had the great pleasure of going to Bart's home in Maryland. And he had to rent a large sort of airport hangar to build this piece. It was originally designed 100% to scale in clay, and then shipped to Loveland, Colorado to be cast. So we also got to go see some of the casting. And this is just the first part of the foundation. There's a second part under the ground, and when we first sent his design to the engineers, they said no way, because this is what touches the ground. So there's a steel structure going all the way up through the horse into the rider's body, and a double foundation. And so they did find a way to do it without sacrificing the artist's original vision. There's one other little piece at this site. Does anyone happen to know what that is?
It is right there.
Yes, yes. All right, well, that's it. I'm happy to answer questions about some of the other public art pieces you've seen around town. Yes?
Carrie, I really struggle with public art. I struggle with it more when it's an art park or it's out in nature,
Uh-huh.
because I kind of think nature doesn't need art.
Yep.
I guess my question, I have two. Is there like an environmental impact? Because when anything with lights goes up, I'm like a songbird person, and during migratory bird season, that's it's already surrounded by lights, so, so I guess, how does that work go on? How does that research? Because all those ravens lined up, man, oh man, I can just see birds come at night and knock into them. Because I only have one raven on a pole,
Yeah.
and it gets bent over. I've had to move it because they come at night thinking, where they leave little pellets for it, like to feed it.
Interesting. Well, that's one of the reasons why Mama Mimi is temporary, because that is a nature park. She is made entirely out of natural materials, except for a little bit of steel inside her hands and feet, anchoring her to the ground. And all of the artworks that I showed that are illuminated are either or both LED lights then they're on a timer, so they go off at 9 or 10 o'clock. So the enclosure in the Center for the Arts Park shut down precisely at 9 or 10 o'clock. The Center for the Arts has a light ordinance that they have to follow. And we don't, none of these artworks are uplit, which is against the rules in the community. And they're all very respectful of dark skies ordinance, so they turn off at a certain time. And we 100% agree that the beauty of our natural world around us is incomparable. And that's why we do very often do pieces that are temporary, so that we are creating an impact, testing out an idea, or just providing a temporary experience and then restoring the site and moving it back out. So we definitely agree with that sentiment, and I think there's a lot of places where we are in a place with so much where scale is so important that you have to go incredibly large scale in order to make an impact. And so you've seen that here at this site very clearly. And Walter Hood designed a beautiful trail for you in order to take advantage of that scale and that incredible background. So we agree, and that's why we follow dark skies rules, and why we do a lot of things that are temporary, and we don't have a lot of lighting on the permanent works because of dark sky rules. So, any other questions? Yes.
I know you mentioned that some of the things were privately funded, but are most of them privately funded, or are they community funded?
Yes, so that's a great question. Jackson Hole Public Art is a nonprofit. The town of Jackson recently passed a % for Art ordinance. Now, if you follow the town of Jackson annual budgeting process, you know their annual budget is maybe $6 million, but the ordinance only impacts a very, very limited portion of that budget. So if the town is building a new courthouse or a new pathway, then 1.5% of that eligible budget would go toward public art. What's ineligible are underground utilities, staff, any kind of equipment like ambulances, fire trucks. So really this ordinance may generate on a given year with a large capital project a $30,000 amount of money for a public artwork, but it's only when the town is doing major capital improvement projects. And they also have the ability to set it aside and pool it into a future project. Because as you say, we're a small town. We don't need to have, little things everywhere. We have great natural beauty around us. So a lot of this will impact the built environment. So inside a rec center or a pathways, underpass, things like that. Any other questions?
Could you say something about that structure on the north side of Broadway?
Sure. We call that the Art Spot. That was designed by Bland Hoke, who is an artist that grew up here. It was originally inspired where Rocky Mountain Bank is now. That used to be an Arco gas station or something like that. And when they closed, they had a huge, one of those big plastic, very tall, 6 by 10 foot plastic signs. They put a black tarp with ropes over it. And it just looked really depressing and a grumpy eyesore on the way in and out of town. And Bland and his friends got permission to put some artworks on it instead. And so they turned it into a little moment of inspiration instead of this terrible looking, temporary cover. And from that, the idea was born to create the Art Spot. It's actually a repurposed Jackson Hole Mountain Resort lift tower, and it goes up and down with a winch. Bland is an amazing inventor, if any of you know him. The winch also just attaches to a battery a car battery, and it goes up and down with a little joystick lever inside. And the counterweights come from an old bank vault and a snowplow blade. And after it was removed from the, when the gas station went away, this new piece was installed at Pete Carnes' property where the new car wash is. And then when that came in, it moved across the street, which is also Carnes family property. So we probably won't have it forever, but the installation now is by Guide Architects, and it's about water and has a little bit of solar energy lighting in it. And we usually change it about once a year. It's a $5,000 commission. And we do a call for artists, and the commission prior to that went to the Rexburg, Idaho art teacher and his students who proposed the escaping puzzle pieces that were running away from the sign. So we've learned that site really is best activated with a sort of joyful, playful, whimsical installation. It's hard to put signage on that site because it's private property, and so you'd have to visit our website to learn more about it. But we're working with the town on eventually being able to just put a little plaque there. Yes?
There's an incredible sculpture of a bull elk in front of the St. John's Clinic
Yes.
on Broadway.
Yes.
Okay, so if memory serves me right, when they tried to build that building there, they were told they couldn't have another sign because the sculpture was basically their signage. Has that changed, and can you do anything to get rid of, I hate to say get rid of trees, because I never want to get rid of trees, but that is an incredible sculpture, and it's lost in the foliage behind it and in the parking lot.
Yeah.
And so, when we do have public art, we should do something to make sure we can continue to see it and appreciate it. And you probably had nothing to do with this. I mean, it's been there since before I got here.
Well, it actually hasn't been there that long. So Jackson Hole Public Art, when many years ago, probably around 2013, this is 3 foundation directors ago, went to the hospital and said, hey, there's this whole body of evidence-based criteria that should guide you in your selection of art for the hospital to promote healing and wellness with your art collection. And so we wrote a set of new guidelines for the hospital that the foundation adopted, because the foundation is essentially responsible for all the art on the campus. And what happened in the past is that a lot of people would sell a home or get rid of their 70s condo and send all their old prints and bronzes and things to the hospital for a tax deduction. Well, now they have evidence-based criteria that the art committee of the St. John's Health Foundation reviews when there's a gift of art. So that elk was a gift of art that was donated, I believe, 2 years before the pandemic, when John Gettler was the president of the foundation there. And that was reviewed by the art committee. It was someone with close ties to the hospital that had it here at their home and did not want to have it anymore. They were moving or something like that. And so it was a piece that they desired to have on campus. And what's awesome is the staff have all taken a great liking to this elk. They put a mask on him during the pandemic.
No, we're talking about 2 different elks.
Okay,
Okay, that's the one that's at the hospital.
yes.
Right. I'm talking about the one on Broadway in St. John's has a clinic, a walk-in clinic.
Oh, I have no idea about that and how that got there.
Yeah.
Just,
That's the one I feel
Yeah.
bad about because it's buried in the trees.
yeah. There's a lot of things that have existed since before we started doing this. John Sims, Ben Roth, Marjorie Torrey Swans at the Visitor Center just to the south of here. The town of Jackson didn't know they owned those swans until I told them that, and now when the sculpture services from Colorado come to do annual cleanings here, they clean those. They clean the Running Man that Jaffa Kerr did, that is owned by the Recreation Center, and a couple other pieces that weren't being taken care of. So we do try to maintain the art that we know, or help the town maintain the art that they own. I believe that that piece probably is owned by the family that owns that lot, which are the family that owns the hardware store there, and maybe the Asbels. So some kind of combination there. I'm not too sure about that one. But. Okay.
What should we look for this summer?
Oh yes. So the next project that we're doing is not necessarily public art. It's more of a creative placemaking project where multiple entities come together and create an enhancement to the public space that also has some history to it. So when Snow King put the gondola in, you may recall they auctioned off the Summit chairs that disappeared in about 10 minutes for $1,500 a chair. Ryan Stanley set aside 25 of those. They are going to be installed as benches and swings from just north of the town square to the summit of Snow King. And with the History Museum, we're writing plaques that tell little stories about the history of Snow King. They will be beautifully colored in surprising alpenglow colors. So if you think of the colors of light reflecting off snow and the color of wildflowers, those are the colors that the chairs are going to be. And it's a combination of public and private funding. The town has invested funding, Snow King, the Snow King Recreation District Association, SCRMA. Over 30 local businesses have contributed. So it's been over 2 years in the making, and again, publicly, privately funded. And to go back to your question, so we get a little, occasionally we will receive some funding for the town or county to consult on a project for them. Like right now, we're helping the rec center. And to also answer your question, Jane, an artist from Minneapolis who is a mosaic artist. If you've ever been through the Minneapolis airport and seen the incredible mosaics in the restrooms there, they're absolutely gorgeous. She is coming here in about a month or so, and she will work with after school kids at the rec center. She'll go on a biologist tour in the park, visit the Raptor Center, and she has 2 initial designs, and then she'll give us a final design based on her visit here. So sometimes we're hired as consultants. We also participate in the Old Bills. We receive state and national grants, and National Endowment for the Arts grants are considered public funding because it's taxpayer money being allocated through a grant. So a variety of funding sources, but similar to the museum, but with the addition of we do consulting work as well sometimes. So we'll have the Snow King Chair Project, and not for another year or so, we'll have a beautiful mosaic on the wall as you walk into the Recreation Center that will be inspired by local flora, fauna, history, etc. And I think we'll also have our Wild Walls Summer Mural program, and that is done in partnership with organizations like the Grand Teton National Park Foundation, the Nature Conservancy, Protect Our Water, Jackson Hole, and other conservation groups. And all the murals reflect a conservation issue or theme that's selected by those groups. And a lot of them are wheat pasted, which means the artist creates an original artwork, we get a high resolution image of it, and then we literally wallpaper it up onto a wall. It's up through Fall Arts Festival for the summer, and then we power wash it off. So it's gone again. So it comes and goes. And that's about it. If you have any other questions or suggestions for us, you can always call me, or our office is in the Center for the Arts. You can stop in and knock on our door and say hi. But thank you, Jane, for having me. Thank you, Danny, for running the slides. Appreciate it.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Carrie.